her, "Hey, listen, like, to mom, we can take this step." And I just
Mhm.
threw my hands up and I said, let the Lord do what they feel is best for me. And you came in and never once did I feel any stress at
Yeah.
all. Even when the kids come to me for questioning about doing anything, Joanna and Rock, and they just handled everything with you. And it was just such a blessing for me. And I talk about you all the
Mhm.
time. I talk about how, a lot of families, and we'll get into it a little bit, a lot of families do have loved ones that are not in the same state. And sometimes getting their loved ones home can be really trying and not the
Right.
unknown, right? Because we don't think about those kind of things
Mhm.
when
Mhm.
we're in another state. We don't even consider like what do we do in this situation? But it is
Right.
because of
Right.
you that we were able to be blessed. And I just hope that people know that there are people like you out here. And as we get going, I want to ask you that first interview question. The calling of many people, people choose different careers, but few for a life calling. Before this became your work, it was a seed planted in you in your upbringing, from what I understand. Can you share when you first recognized that serving grieving families was more than a job, that it was a purpose placed in your life?
I think growing up, we came from a Christian family, and we had that servant attitude even then, and I think that's where that part of that comes from both my parents, and it makes me go back and think even back in grade school, I always just had that desire and not even knowing it of helping. We even some of the kids I grew up with, we'd be out there playing and they'd fall down and get hurt. And then I was seemed like I was always the first one to going over there. Are you okay? You need some help? And and that just followed me through school. I played sports, football, basketball, and it ran track. And even when we had good hits on people, I'm asking the other opposing player, "Are you okay?" I want to make sure they're okay. Then they get up, and then we'd go right back at it. But I think just growing up, being helpful, being courteous, being kind, it was instilled in me, that I would watch my dad, help people doing things. My mom, she was a nurse. So that's where that part comes from, just quietly helping, and I've just ingrained that, into my spirit. Hmm.
Wow, that's wonderful. And most people only see funeral services for a moment, but you carry families on a much longer journey. You're like emotionally there. There with them from the moment. How do you hold space for other people's grief without being consumed with it within yourself?
I believe, and then this is my belief, and I'm sure other funeral directors and embalmers would probably have different, respects on it. But even when that case comes, that call comes in, I'm praying for that family. So I'm constantly praying because I have to keep myself prayed up because now I'm coming into an arena where this family, they've just lost a loved one, and believe it or not, sometimes I can actually truly feel that pain. But I'm actually praying and say, I need to do what I need to do to make this family feel better. And I'm asking the Lord to give me that strength to do that because they're in that situation. They don't know what to do or how to do it. And the Lord is just giving me the ability to go ahead and do that because this was not my first choice of occupations. I never would have dreamed growing up I would become a funeral director. No, this was not because when I first started, and I'll tell this story real quick. Great. They couldn't get me to walk through the funeral home.
Oh,
I would
see.
walk around the building because all I wanted to do was drive the limousines. That was the only thing that really impressed me upon at that time. And my uncle, he said, "What?" And I always tell him, "One day when I get big, I'm gonna come and work with you over at the funeral home." And I was a little kid, didn't know no better. And then I would sit up there and I was ask him questions. Then he answered all the questions that I asked. And then I get up and leave. And instead of walking across the sidewalk, I would cut across his grass. His house was the only house where we lived that had a sidewalk. And I would just cut across the grass and he would fuss at me. But come cutting across the grass, and I'd come back the next day, ask him questions. He would take the time to answer those questions. So when I finally came over, decided, I'll drive, but I'm not going back there to do anything. And they would laugh at me to this day for the few that's still there. Instead of walking through the funeral home, I walk around the building, all the way around the building, through the garage. They pull the limo out and go ahead and go. Somewhere along the line, that changed.
Wow.
It just changed. And,
Wow.
and I believe there was nobody but the Lord that just steered me in that right direction there.
Absolutely. I was gonna
Mhm,
say that, when God has us, He has us all here for a purpose. Even if we don't think
mhm,
what our reason and purpose is, eventually
right,
it becomes ours. And it's your purpose when it's something it
mhm.
doesn't feel like work.
Right, and it's not work to me. I never once have I considered it work because the hours are all over the place, and we'll get the call, and I may come home, but if that call comes in, now I'm in that mode. I got to make sure this family is taken care of. So I'll go back over and just do what need to be done. Make sure their loved one is looking together,
Wow.
and I just take that as a ministry, basically.
Yes.
So it's truly not a job. It's truly not a
It is.
job.
And it's truly you're living your purpose and
Yes.
it shows, right? It shows
Mhm.
in your dedication to not only the community and the people you serve, but your dedication to the Lord. It just shows, and that's so powerful.
Absolutely.
So let's talk a
Mhm.
little bit about your generational legacy. You were mentored inside a family-owned legacy of compassion. In what
Yeah.
ways has continuing the legacy shaped your definition of service, like manhood, leadership, or in faith? What has that done for you?
I gotta take that in several areas. The late Albert Rhoden, he was my mentor, and, one thing always stuck out with him, and he always said, "You take care of the families, and the business will take care of itself." And
Mm.
it's all really, and, as simple as it sounds, it's all about that family. Our motto at the funeral home is dignity, honesty, and respect. And, we all live that. We have 3 generations in the business now. My younger cousin, she just became licensed. So she's carrying that legacy on. It's been instilled within her. And when you give that family the respect, the honesty, and the dignity, because we're in a day now where nothing's business wise, nobody's honest about anything.
Amen.
And it's sad to say you have some who's looking just about the money. And it goes beyond that because everybody that comes through that door, their financial situation is different. And we've learned just to meet the need of that family, regardless how much money they spend. After that service is over with, they still got to live, eat, and pay bills. And that's one thing that we try to do. We try to make it affordable and accommodating for everybody. So it's not about the money. I understand it's a business, but afterwards, you still got to make sure that family is well taken care of.
And I can tell you that you guys definitely took a
Mhm,
huge financial burden off of me and, allowing the kids to work with you with what we had. And it was
mhm.
just amazing. It was just, I just still like can't believe it. But I do know that I hope when the Lord calls me home that my children, they know who to go to. They know where mama is to be handled, right? With you guys, right there
Okay,
with Road, nowhere else. They know that. A little bit aside of healing. Because also sometimes, right? What
right.
have you learned about grief that other side of the world doesn't understand and wish people knew more about?
Well, going through going through the death, you always have those 5 stages of death, and there's no sequential order because they could come all over the place at any given time. What you need to learn to do, I mean, you need to learn to recognize the family itself. Because sometimes you just got to be real passionate, you got to be real sympathetic, and you have to be open and honest with the families. We understand the jargon and the terminology of the funeral business. Most folks don't understand that. They're not going to remember all those terms. When I meet with a family, I keep it very, very, very simple. And I don't give them a whole lot. I just give them, what they need to get at this particular point, something that they can understand and they feel comfortable with, because that's the point where you're making that connection with the family. They're putting their trust in you. They're telling you all the business, the family business is up to that director to make sure that that family is taken care of.
Mm.
There's some things that other family members may not know. You recognize the person who's really in charge of handling everything. If there's an issue within that family, at that point, you need to become the mediator, because, you don't want to go from side side to the other side. You really want to have that family come together. If there are differences, this is the time to put those differences aside because it's not about what you all are grieving and beefing about. It's about the person who just passed. So let's put that aside and make sure your loved one is taken care of.
Yes, that's wonderful.
Mm.
And I know you see a lot of that, I'm sure, because families, you're going through everybody's going through a loss in some kind of way, right? We're all
Right.
going through our own emotions and feelings and how we deal with loss. And it seems to be, unfortunately, when a loved one is gone, that sometimes it shows sides of families that you didn't know
Mm.
existed. But can you
Right.
you go back and give us a little history about your services and, the Rhoden, and tell us a little bit about it so that those of us that are not familiar with it, because of course we're going to see viewers all over the world will catch our podcast,
Mhm.
right? But if
Mhm.
we have someone locally there in Ohio and may want to find out, just give us a little history.
We are a family owned business. It started by the late Julian Turner, who was well known in the community, and that was a little bit before my time. But he created a legacy of love and compassion throughout the community. And then once my uncle came in, Albert Rhoden, he kept that same legacy going, and that's what we're truly holding on today. And I believe we're probably the oldest Black funeral home you know, in the city of Akron. Now, we have we have 3 generation well, let's see, with Al, but passing, myself, my cousin Taria, my cousin Tron. We have 2 locations. Tron is manager, the one in our Canton location, and then Taria is the manager of the Akron, and then I'm there in the Akron office, and then now we have her daughter, Ayana, who's just become a licensed funeral director. So I'm sure Al, he's smiling down on us that, we're still continuing that legacy. And it's all about the service and love that we're providing.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
And as far as a funeral director in your role, explain to us, what does that mean? Like, what is your main responsibility in what you do?
Being a funeral director, that's when you're making the connection with the family. You're getting all the vital information that's needed. You're making the necessary calls for the type of disposition of the body, either be burial or cremation. You're putting all those calls in to the cemeteries, the crematories, bringing everything together. So basically, you're like the overseer of the whole funeral ceremony itself. Things are so different now. You have traditional funerals, you have service cremations, you have direct cremations, and once you meet with that family, that's when you determine what type of service that you're going to have. They are the ones who will get all the paperwork and permits and stuff necessary. Even in your case, trying to get your husband back home to Ohio,
Yeah.
it was my responsibility to work with the company there, the airlines, to get him back in a suitable time. We're in a state now where everything is challenging. But once again, we thank the Lord for everything to go smooth. But when you stand on top of all that, everything that I asked for as far as information, your daughter, she was just so beautiful. Everything I asked for, she was right on top of it. I check with your mom to make sure this is okay, and that's when you're developing the relationships, because it's not just a business. You're developing friendships that you can carry on even after everything is done. And that's how we really look at it and feel with it
Yeah.
and everything. Although, but the nephew being a family member, we still develop those relationships along the way. And I love that.
Yeah.
Because we're in a community, we live together, and we just take care of one another.
Yeah, absolutely. And Marsha, I'll tell you that initially, my husband and I got to talk a little bit about his desires and mine. And I know we both wanted to be back home if something ever happened. But initially,
Mhm,
we were here. And my nephew, my son in law, Darius, which we know as Rob, he was with me and our youngest son, Dante, and my daughter, Joanna, his wife. We were, we went, I can tell you, I visited probably I think 3 to 4 different
mhm,
places here in North Carolina. Nothing felt like it was right, which is, I think I think he was hesitant, but when he finally spoke to my daughter and they both sat me down, I was at so much peace. I knew that was what I
mhm.
was supposed to be doing, is bringing him home. But then in my
Mhm.
mind, a lot of families don't understand. We don't know, what do you
Right.
do to get that loved one home? How do that process start? Do you have recommendations that if they're not coming home to, let's say, Akron, Ohio, or to you, what does a family do to start seeking if they wanna bring their loved one back to whatever state they're in?
I think that's a conversation that probably needs to be had within the family themselves. If you're living out of state and you want to come back home, I
Yeah,
would make that
what
known
would you
to,
do if
to your loved
somebody's
one.
children, and they're like, "Okay, my
Hmm.
mom wants us." She wa in her will, she wants to be here in North Carolina, I'm just gonna say. What would a
Hmm.
family living in Illinois, where do they start? Is that with the hospital? Do they start with the funeral home they're gonna use? What would be their starting point?
Well, and then that's where you would probably want to get together and get pre-arrangements made. So
Okay, okay,
you know what your final wishes are. So an example, you wanted to come back to Ohio so the kids would know what your wishes were. So at that point, that kind of gets the ball rolling. Okay, mom wants to come back home. So now, once that death has occurred, you let that facility know this is the funeral home that we're dealing with.
okay,
From there, and then once you have that roadmap with the pre-arrangement, that kind of sets the guidelines of how things are going to roll. If there is no pre-arrangements, that's one of the questions right away you want to ask. Are we going to stay here? Or are we going back home?
okay,
Wherever that case may be, that's when you put that call into that funeral home of your choice. For example, if you're coming back to Ohio and you're coming back to us, you put that call into us. We're starting to get that information that's needed to get the body picked up, get the necessary documentation, everything done there. Because what a lot of people don't know, wherever that death occurs at, is where the death certificate is filed at. So that receiving funeral home needs to receive all that vital information, which is passed on, and then between the funeral home that we're working with, that's when we make the moves to get the body back, to its destination.
well, see, that was all
So
seamless to us. You kept that
yeah, it's yeah, somewhat of a
that out of
process,
our
but that's part of and that's part of the services that we provide. We work with an outside company, particularly when it's out of state. It's a national company that we work with. That kind of help expedite and everything flows real smoothly as well. But the initial call, making sure that loved one coming back home, if it's going to be a burial or a cremation, because that kind of gives us the direction which way we need to start moving. We're getting the paperwork and stuff together and everything.
Yeah, that's great. Again, I'm and to our viewers and listeners, for everyone that's listening to this podcast, this episode that is very near and dear to my heart. I can tell you that I never had 1 ounce of worry or stress. It was totally taken away from me, and I was baffled to know that this kind of service was available. And I don't know, I don't know, is this something most normal funeral homes do, or are you just an exception to the rule?
Well, and
Because
I'm real
I
humble
had a
about it
gentleman.
because I take everybody that we serve, and we have that servant mentality
Yeah,
as though they were a family member of our own.
yeah,
Because I kind of look at it. What if that was my family member?
yeah,
And I speak from that on a personal level because I buried two of my younger brothers. So I kind of understand and feel what it is like on that other end. And I would want that same service and respect given to me and everything.
absolutely.
Hmm.
I love that. I love it, and I just hope that for those that don't know, just know it's always a hard conversation to have, but it's a necessary conversation to have, and you don't have to go
Hmm.
it alone, okay? You do not have to go it alone. Like you heard March say, they have 2 locations in Akron and in Canton, in Ohio. They need to be worldwide if you ask me. So let's talk a little bit about resilience and faith. This podcast, as you know, is about being unstoppable. No matter what life throws at us, no matter how tragic it's, we got to keep moving. And having a strong faith is very important in us, in any of us, to continue to just thrive in this place we call life. Because life isn't easy, but because purpose keeps us standing. Where do you personally draw strength, and what keeps you grounded when the emotional weight of this calling feels heavy?
I would probably say, because I do have a strong faith, but simply the best satisfaction I get out of it when that family says, he looks good, she looks good. That gives me the motivation and the strength to continue on. And I am human. I do have feelings and emotions. And my escape, I come home, to the family, the grandkids, the two grandboys, and play with them, and then making those relationships with the families that we serve. There's some right down the street, round the corner. You see them in the store, and I'm notorious to give them a hug, pick them up, because that's where you develop those relationships at, and that's truly where I would get that strength from. I am in a fraternity, Alpha Phi Alpha.
All
We
right.
do have a couple
Welcome.
of poems that we learn the test of a man. It's the fight that he makes, the grit that he daily shows. Life isn't easy. And this day-to-day life that we dealing with, it's something else. I be, even to this day, I revert back to some of those poems, to stand strong. And I hold on to that. And then, even in my own little way, I'll meet with the family, I'll extend the call, offer my condolences once that body is embalmed. I'll give them a call, give them an update on that. But even through that all, even at the arrangement conference, at after the services is over with, through each process, I say, Lord, I thank you.
Yeah.
Lord, I thank you. Lord, I thank you. And to God be the glory. And
Amen.
nothing that it is nobody but the goodness of the Lord. Everything and anything could go awry, but this is the one opportunity. You want everything to be on point. You want everything to work right. And then that goes back again. What if this was my family member? I want to make sure everything's going the way it's supposed to go. And then when it doesn't, you address it and you deal with it right away.
Absolutely.
Because life is perfect, and you just make those necessary adjustments. But you keep the family informed, keep them involved, and let them know. And they appreciate that.
I know
They
we did.
appreciate that.
I know we did,
Mhm.
and my husband's wishes was to have a small ceremony. He didn't
Mhm.
want the world looking at him. He didn't want to be on display, and he was very
Mhm.
clear, and so was I. It was just we both had our stuff written out, so all we had to do was give it to the
Mhm.
children. They knew what our
Right.
wishes were, and
Mhm.
although we didn't have time, to prepare for this, it just, the Lord was ready for him, even though we wasn't. And,
Right.
Right. Again, the most important part about all of this with working with you and Rhoden was that there was never 1 second I felt any ounce of stress, lack of compassion and caring. You guys took it easy. I felt no rush. I felt just the service was beautiful. I think that I know our daughter Joanna and Rock did an amazing, amazing tribute to their dad. And it's just for me, I just had to have you on because I this podcast was created to help me grieve, turn my pain into a
Mhm.
purpose. And the purpose is to help
Mhm.
others find a way to move forward and not grieve. And so having you here was the completion of making sure that I let people know that there are people out here like you that are heaven
Thank you.
sent and that serve the Lord and love what they do. And it ain't about the money. It's all about making sure that that family
Mhm.
feels the love, the respect, the honor that they so desire for while they're going through the roughest time of their life.
Absolutely.
It's bowl. It's not my first you guys, it's not my first loss, but it was definitely one that we didn't have time or had no clue was gonna happen. And so I
Mhm.
thank you again for it. Is there any closing remarks or anything you wanna say to our listeners that may be experiencing right now a loss or planning to have a home going? Any words to anyone out there you want them to know to help them stay strong?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you again for allowing me to come on. Cause see, this is therapeutic for me as well. I'm able to do this after the service is over with. Once again, you develop the relationships along the way. I would, encourage families to talk with their family members. They get those ideas of what those final wishes and desires are. Just sometimes, you get with that funeral home of your choice, and then you meet with them. And if you're not comfortable, then you find one that you're comfortable with. But make your family known. So whenever that time will come, because nobody knows, nor the day, nor the hour that time may come or how it's going to come. If you have that, down and the family members know, that kind of helps make that transition somewhat easy. Although it's always going to be difficult and hard, but when you have mechanisms like that in place already, and it's nothing to get with a funeral home and sit down and make your arrangements. And I know we do them, and you can constantly come back and change them. There's no cost to that. But once your family knows, what your final wishes are, that kind of helps it out, makes it a little bit easier during that difficult time. But that is the most stressful, difficult times because you have so many questions that need to be answered. What we gonna do? How are we gonna do it? Where are we gonna come up with the money to do it? And we're in an economic climate where everything is a big question mark because you just don't know. You just don't know. And I always say, one of my biggest things, talk with your family, talk with your loved ones to let them know what your wishes are and everything. It's one thing, I think you mentioned it earlier. We don't like to talk about it
Yeah.
until that time comes, but it needs to be
Mm.
talked about and discussed.
As hard as it is to have that
Yeah.
conversation,
Yeah.
you don't you always feel like you got time, but it's good to get it done,
Hmm.
and like you said, it's always good you can change your mind, but have that hard
Right.
conversation with your loved ones because tomorrow's not promised, and you wanna know what they want. It makes you feel a whole lot better knowing you service and you're doing what they wishes are and not what you think they want. So,
Hmm.
thank you so much for that. March, thank you for sharing your wisdom and your heart today. Before we
Oh,
close,
thank you.
I'd love for you to tell our listeners how they can reach you and how they can connect with you or the services you provide for families who may need your support.
Okay. Rhoden Memorial, 1101 Palmetto Avenue. That's Palmetto Avenue, Akron, Ohio, 44306. Phone number 330-724-1201. Or you can reach me personally, because I'm just a personable person.
Yes, you are.
My number is 330-414, and the email address is marchferg, MARCHFERG at yahoo.com. And then the Akron email address is Akron at Rhoden Memorial.
At Rhoden Memorial. I wanna make sure I put that on the website as well. And you do have
Okay.
a website,
Hmm.
correct?
Yes, we do.
What's your
And you could just go Rhoden to Rhoden Memorial, and then you'll pull it up.
Okay, great.
Hmm.
And everyone, if you do wanna reach, Mr. Ferguson, he is going to be on the, his picture in his bio is on our website. I am gonna make sure I link to the bottom of this video, their Rodin's website as well and contact information so that you can reach it as well, okay? So don't worry, I won't leave anybody hanging out there. In March again, thank you again for your transparency, your service, you're holding families together when life feels like it's falling apart. You are a reminder that compassion is not weakness. It is a spirit, strength lived out throughout all the actions you serve.
Thank
Conversation
you.
was a blessing for me.